your mom stood in the checkout line with a handful of coupons and a prayer that the total stayed under $10. That was grocery shopping in the 1970s when you were stretching every last cent. You knew exactly which aisles to hit and which brands to grab because looking rich was never the point. Feeding your family was. Some of these items were so cheap they practically gave them away, and others tasted so good you never even realized they were the budget option. A few of them are still on shelves today, but most of them disappeared right along with those orange price stickers. If any of this sounds familiar, hit subscribe because you are going to feel right at home here. Here are 60 grocery items from the 1970s you bought if you were poor. Walk into any American supermarket in the mid-80s and the dairy aisle was a wall of low-fat and fat-free yogurt. Each container dyed a cheerful fruit color and sweetened with enough sugar to rival a candy bar. Full-fat yogurt had been shoved aside by the same dietary guidelines that condemned butter, whole milk, and eggs. Without fat, yogurt tasted like sour paste, so manufacturers compensated with corn syrup, modified food starch, and artificial flavors. Some low-fat yogurts contained more sugar per serving than a glazed donut. Full-fat yogurt, meanwhile, kept you satisfied longer, contained conjugated linoleic acid linked to reduced body fat, and promoted the absorption of every fat-soluble vitamin in the meal. Multiple studies have since linked full-fat dairy consumption with a lower risk of metabolic syndrome, the cluster of conditions that includes high blood sugar and excess belly fat. What grocery stores sold as a diet food was, nutritionally, closer to frosting. Cashiers who made change entirely from memory were one of the quiet marvels of grocery shopping in the 1970s, the kind of skill people relied on without ever stopping to admire. There were no digital displays, no automatic coin dispensers, and no screens telling the cashier how much to hand back. The total was punched in, the customer handed over a bill, and the cashier calculated the difference in their head before pulling coins and bills from the drawer with practiced fingers. It happened so fast that most shoppers never questioned the accuracy. These cashiers handled dozens of transactions an hour, juggling prices, coupons, and odd change without breaking rhythm. Kids watched in fascination as coins clicked into open palms and bills were counted back with a flick of the wrist. It was a performance nobody called a performance because it was simply part of the job. Mistakes were rare, and when they happened, a quick recount settled the matter without tension. Today, registers calculate everything automatically, and many cashiers never touch the math at all. The skill that once defined the job has quietly disappeared, replaced by technology that is faster but far less human. Chlorofluorocarbon cooking sprays were kitchen staples throughout the 1980s, making it easy to coat pans and grease baking sheets with just a quick press of a nozzle. These aerosol cans sat beside stoves in nearly every home, used daily for frying eggs and preparing roasts. The spray came out in a fine mist that felt almost magical compared to pouring oil or spreading butter by hand. Families loved the convenience, and nobody thought twice about what propelled that mist out so effortlessly. But chlorofluorocarbons, the gases that made aerosol sprays work, were silently drifting upward and destroying the ozone layer that protects the planet from harmful radiation. Scientists discovered the damage and raised alarms that eventually reached policymakers worldwide. The ban on chlorofluorocarbons came as part of international agreements to protect the atmosphere, and cooking sprays were forced to switch to different propellants. Shoppers barely noticed the change in their kitchens, but the shift marked one of the first times a common grocery product was pulled for environmental reasons rather than direct health concerns, a reminder that what we spray indoors can affect the entire world. Tinned fish packed in PCB-laced oil was once considered a healthy, protein-rich option for busy families. Tuna, sardines, and anchovies sat neatly in shiny metal tins, waiting to become quick lunches or midnight snacks. The oil inside kept them moist and flavorful, but it also carried a hidden poison. At the time, convenience was king, and no one thought to question what made those tins last so long on the shelf. Housewives trusted the packaging, the labels, and the smiling faces in the ads that promised ocean-fresh flavor. The irony was cruel. In trying to make food safer from spoilage, manufacturers had filled it with something far worse. Polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, were used in industrial lubricants and electrical equipment. Somehow, they found their way into the oils used for food preservation, contaminating entire batches of canned fish. PCBs did not break down easily. They accumulated in the body, linked to cancers and reproductive harm. At the time, no one had a clue that a simple tuna sandwich could contain a chemical cousin of motor oil. When the scandal finally broke, it rocked the seafood industry and reshaped how food safety was monitored. Factories were overhauled, regulations tightened, and faith in clean eating took a heavy blow. The sea that had fed generations now carried a warning label of its own. Diet shakes in paint can-style tins were the height of scientific dieting and the bottom of human appetite. These oversized metal cans promised controlled calories and perfect figures, as long as you could choke down what was inside. The shakes were sold in flavors like chocolate, vanilla, and tropical, though they all tasted like sweet rust. The powder stuck to everything: blenders, spoons, your throat, and the metallic smell never left the kitchen. Opening one felt like prying into an industrial accident. The scoop inside was always buried, forcing you to dig through clouds of powder that coated your arms like chalk. Mixing it with milk turned the liquid gray, not brown, and somehow made it thicker than cement. The aftertaste lingered like a chemical warning. You weren't just dieting. You were participating in a science experiment gone wrong. Companies called them complete meal solutions, but most people needed a real meal just to recover from the experience. Advertisements showed glamorous models holding giant tins like trophies, as if suffering were chic. In the end, the only weight most people lost was their patience. Those cans promised control, but they mostly delivered a reminder: food should never taste like aluminum ambition. Nothing captures the contradictions of 1970s entertaining quite like the Ritz Crackers Hostess Fantasy ads. Women in evening gowns arranged plates of crackers topped with improbable combinations: tuna salad, grapes, and sometimes both together. The slogan promised the elegant touch, though the results looked more like panic in party form. These ads turned finger food into performance art. The women were always smiling, perfect hair, perfect pearls, while balancing trays of snacks no one could possibly want. Every shot gleamed with effort, not enjoyment, like the food version of holding your breath. The women posed like models in a cooking catalog, each canapé a tiny act of self-control wrapped in mayonnaise. The message was simple and cruel. Grace was something you could fake with enough crackers and composure. Ritz wasn't selling flavor, it was selling control. The fantasy that with just one box of crackers, you could become the perfect hostess, unshaken by chaos. The irony, of course, is that it was chaos: the toppings, the pressure, the performance. It's the kind of elegance that wilts under scrutiny. Today, it's impossible not to laugh at how seriously they took it and how proudly they posed beside the world's most confusing canapé. Finally, there were the tamarindo lollipops from Mexico, sweet, sour, and dusted with chili powder. Kids loved them for their bold flavor, something that made American candies seem plain by comparison. They were a favorite at corner stores and fiestas alike, a little piece of imported joy. But beneath that spicy coating lurked something deadly. When the news broke about the lead contamination, it spread through communities like heartbreak. Parents who had grown up eating them now had to take them away from their own children, turning joy into fear. Investigations revealed that some batches were contaminated with lead, not just in the candy itself, but in the packaging and ink used on wrappers. The ban came swiftly, and shipments stopped overnight. Families who had grown up with those treats felt an unexpected sense of loss. What was once a taste of culture and childhood became a cautionary tale about oversight and safety. Yet for many, that flavor, the heat, the tang, the sweetness, still carries memories of home. It is strange how something that once united so many people could be forbidden so suddenly. But maybe that is what nostalgia is all about, remembering what we loved even when we were not supposed to. PB crisps were the snack that disappeared way too soon. Imagine crispy, cookie-shaped shells shaped like peanuts stuffed with creamy peanut butter inside, light, flaky, and addictive. They hit that perfect balance between salty and sweet, like a peanut butter cookie that had evolved into its final form. The smell hit you first, a toasted, nutty sweetness that could make any kitchen feel like heaven. Each bite shattered in your mouth with that buttery crunch, followed by the smooth peanut filling melting right after. It wasn't just a snack. It was an experience you could taste, smell, and feel all at once. Every bite crunched, then melted, and then made you instantly reach for another. It was the kind of snack you didn't just eat, you devoured. People kept boxes hidden in pantries the way adults hide good chocolate now. The packaging showed a happy little peanut character smiling like he knew the secret to happiness. He kind of did. Even now, decades later, fans post online petitions and social media campaigns begging for PB crisps to make a comeback. Few snacks earn that kind of loyalty, but these did, with every flake and crumble burned into memory. They weren't just cookies, they were comfort disguised as crunch. Then, without warning, PB crisps vanished in the mid-90s. Fans still mourn them online, begging planters to bring them back. That kind of love doesn't fade, it just waits. PB crisps weren't just a snack, they were comfort in a bag, and every bite tasted like nostalgia waiting to happen. Chef Boyardee spaghetti and meatballs brought Italian food to the American dinner table, canned, convenient, and ready in minutes. To families who had never seen real pasta before, it was exotic and exciting. The red sauce, the soft noodles, and the tiny meatballs were a revelation for suburban kitchens. It was a product of the immigrant dream made accessible to everyone. Opening that can was like opening the door to another culture, safe, sweet, and just foreign enough to feel adventurous. It was comfort food with a passport, wrapped in a label that felt both friendly and daring. Chef Boyardee himself became a household name, a smiling symbol of culinary adventure you could trust. It was a way to feel worldly without leaving your kitchen, and that felt like progress. The canned pasta might not have been authentic, but it was comforting, consistent, and distinctly American. It made weeknight dinners easier and mealtime a little more exciting. For a generation raised on casseroles and meatloaf, it was a taste of something new, safe, simple, and satisfying. Chef Boyardee proved that food could be both foreign and familiar, opening the door for a nation ready to eat its way into modernity. Swanson's canned whole chicken was proof that humanity will try anything once and only once. Picture this: you open a can, tip it upside down, and a pale, boneless bird slithers out with the texture of a wet towel. It was supposed to be a miracle of efficiency. An entire roasted chicken in one can, but it looked like something out of a horror movie. When it hit the plate, it made a sickening thud that echoed through kitchens like a warning. The skin had the look of melted plastic, the color of sadness, and the consistency of gelatin. Housewives gagged mid-dinner prep, while husbands pretended to be brave enough to taste it. Even the family dog, normally loyal and forgiving, took one sniff and retreated. The broth it came in was greasy, gelatinous, and vaguely alive, clinging to the chicken like regret. Housewives in the 1970s tried to make casseroles or sandwiches with it, but most couldn't get past the smell. Swanson insisted it was tender and flavorful, but photographs alone destroyed appetites nationwide. It was the kind of food you kept in your pantry only for the end of the world, and even then you might think twice. Opening one wasn't cooking. It was trauma in aluminum form. Somewhere between progress and punishment, this canned bird became the symbol of everything wrong with 1970s convenience dining. Powdered gelatin desserts in odd flavors became another strange feature of the wartime pantry. While fruit-flavored gelatin had long been popular, the 1940s introduced savory flavors like tomato, celery, or even chicken. These powders were marketed as creative ways to stretch meals, turning leftovers into molded salads or aspics. Government pamphlets even included recipes for gelatin meat salads, showing off peas, carrots, and even hot dogs floating in wobbly shapes. Magazines praised them as thrifty, modern, and attractive, though many families quietly dreaded serving them. Children in particular were baffled, expecting dessert but finding vegetables inside. Homemakers were encouraged to suspend vegetables, meat scraps, or even fish inside jiggling blocks of gelatin, creating bizarre dishes that baffled children and guests alike. The idea was efficiency, nothing wasted, everything served. Cookbooks filled with recipes for salads that combined gelatin with mayonnaise, peas, and carrots, insisting they were both nutritious and elegant. In truth, they were strange, often unappetizing, and today they are remembered mostly as culinary curiosities. Few recipes from this gelatin craze survived beyond the wartime years, but the memory of tomato-flavored gelatin lingers as one of the oddest items ever sold in grocery stores. Glass peanut butter jars reused as cups were another trademark of poor family kitchens. Brands like Skippy and Jif often sold their spreads in heavy glass containers that doubled as drinking glasses once emptied. Mothers washed them out carefully, peeled off the labels, and suddenly you had a set of sturdy cups. Kool-Aid, sweet tea, or plain tap water tasted just as good out of a peanut butter jar as it did out of any fancy glassware. Some jars even came with printed designs, cartoon characters, or logos that made them more fun than anything store-bought. Kids claimed their favorites, and God help you if a sibling drank out of your peanut butter glass. They rattled in dish racks, thick enough to survive endless drops, and often outlived real glasses that broke in a year. Families never wasted money on drinkware when they were essentially handed out for free at the grocery store. They were heavy, practical, and often mismatched, but that was part of their charm. Guests drank from them without complaint because everyone had them, and everyone understood. In poor households of the 1970s, those jars were proof that nothing useful ever went to waste. Full-fat aged cheese was a quiet casualty of the low-fat revolution, pushed off recommended food lists and replaced on grocery shelves by processed singles wrapped in plastic, made from vegetable oil and milk protein concentrate. Real cheese, aged on wooden boards in temperature-controlled rooms, was a fermented food containing vitamin K2, conjugated linoleic acid, calcium, and bacterial cultures that supported gut health. A 2018 Lancet study of over 130,000 participants across 21 countries found that dairy consumption, including cheese, was associated with lower cardiovascular risk. The French, who never abandoned full-fat cheese, had significantly lower rates of heart disease than Americans who obediently switched to processed substitutes. Researchers called this the French paradox. It was never really a paradox. The French ate real food. Americans ate products designed by committee. Cigarette aisles right next to the cereal were one of those arrangements in 1970s grocery stores that nobody questioned. Tobacco products sat openly on shelves, sometimes at eye level for children, displayed in bright packaging that competed for attention alongside breakfast foods. Parents walked past without concern, picking up a carton alongside bread and eggs as if cigarettes were just another household supply. Kids stared at the colorful logos and bold lettering, absorbing imagery that was never meant to be subtle. There were no locked cases, no age verification signs, and no barriers between the candy rack and the cigarette display. It was simply how stores were organized, a reflection of a time when smoking was woven so deeply into daily life that it shared shelf space with everything else. Some stores placed promotional displays near the checkout, offering discounts on tobacco beside the gum and magazines. The casualness feels unbelievable now, in a world where cigarettes hide behind counters and carry warning labels. But in the 1970s, tobacco and groceries lived side by side, and no one saw anything unusual about it. Trans-fat margarine sticks were kitchen staples throughout the 1980s, sitting in refrigerators beside butter as the supposedly healthier alternative that doctors and advertisers promoted relentlessly. Families spread it on toast, melted it into baked goods, and used it for frying because everyone believed that vegetable-based fats were better for hearts than animal fats could ever be. The margarine held its shape perfectly, lasted longer than butter, and cost less at the checkout counter, which made it feel like a smart choice for budget-conscious households. Parents felt virtuous choosing margarine over butter convinced they were protecting their families from cholesterol and heart disease. But trans fats, created through partial hydrogenation, turned out to be far worse than the saturated fats they replaced. Research eventually linked them to increased heart disease, stroke risk, and dangerous cholesterol imbalances that accumulated silently over years of daily use. When regulators finally banned partially hydrogenated oils from the food supply, the margarine aisle transformed almost overnight, and families realized the healthy choice they had trusted for decades was anything but. Cyclamate artificial sweetener was the dream of every dieter in the 1950s. It promised sweetness without sugar, indulgence without guilt. Early advertisements called it a scientific miracle, the modern answer to cravings. It found its way into sodas, desserts, and even chewing gum. People felt like they were living in the future, where chemistry could fix every flaw of human appetite. Cafes and soda fountains served slim milkshakes, and homemakers stocked their shelves with low-calorie cake mixes, thinking science had finally conquered temptation. But the sweetness came with a bitter aftertaste of trust misplaced. People loved it, especially diabetics who finally had a way to enjoy sweet things again. But by 1969, everything changed. Studies on lab rats linked cyclamate to cancer, and the Food and Drug Administration banned it almost overnight. For a product that had been called the future of flavor, it was a shocking end. The shelves emptied and the world went back to sugar, realizing that sometimes science can promise too much too soon. The ban became one of the earliest examples of America learning that not every innovation is safe, no matter how sweet it seems. Jiffy cornbread mix came in small boxes that cost almost nothing and produced golden squares of warm, slightly sweet bread that paired beautifully with nearly everything on the holiday table. The batter took minutes to prepare, stirred together with an egg and a splash of milk before sliding into the oven alongside whatever else was already cooking. Kids fought over the corner pieces where the crust turned crispy and the edges browned just enough to crackle between their teeth. Parents served it with chili, with beans, with ham, and with anything else that needed something warm and filling to complete the plate properly. The box promised simplicity, and it delivered without fail every single time the family needed it. Real cornbread from scratch took more ingredients, more time, and more skill than busy holiday kitchens could always afford to spare. Jiffy bridged the gap without apology, offering a shortcut that tasted close enough to homemade that most people never questioned it. The little blue and white box became a holiday staple in homes where the budget demanded compromises, earning loyalty from families who came to depend on its quiet reliability. Few ads capture the blind optimism of the 1970s, like Tang's Breakfast of Astronauts campaign. Housewives in pastel kitchens poured bright orange powder into glasses of water, proudly telling their kids they were drinking what the astronauts drink. The space race had ended, but the marketing galaxy was still expanding, and Tang wanted to keep orbiting America's imagination. The commercials showed children hesitantly sipping the sugary concoction as a narrator boomed, "It's the taste of tomorrow," a line that aged faster than the product itself. In reality, Tang was a sugary, citrus-flavored drink mix with more chemicals than vitamins. But that didn't stop it from claiming energy for the day's adventures. Mothers were told it would make their kids smarter, stronger, and maybe even a little closer to the stars. What makes it so awkward today isn't just the forced enthusiasm, it's how earnestly people believe that a cup of orange dust could turn breakfast into a NASA mission. It's both charming and bizarre, a window into a time when science and sugar shared the same spoon. Few things smell as comforting as butter-flavored popcorn fresh from the microwave. But behind that warm, golden aroma was a secret chemical called diacetyl. In the early 2000s, factory workers who inhaled the buttery fumes began developing severe lung conditions later called popcorn lung. The discovery shocked the public. People started looking at their microwaves differently, realizing that even a bag of popcorn could hold a hidden danger. Families who once filled their homes with that smell of movie night joy now hesitated, torn between comfort and caution. Something so innocent, something made for movie nights and family gatherings, could actually hurt the people who made it. The lawsuits came fast, and major brands were forced to abandon diacetyl. The new formulas never quite smelled the same. Yet even now, the old scent still lives in memory, rich, smooth, and dangerously nostalgic. It reminds us that comfort sometimes comes with a cost, and that the sweetest smells can carry stories we were never meant to breathe in. Gushers fruit snacks were part candy, part science experiment, and entirely unforgettable. Each chewy little gem was packed with a mysterious liquid center that exploded the moment you bit down. It wasn't just a snack, it was an experience. Every pack came with that moment of suspense. Would this one gush perfectly or squirt sideways onto your shirt? The commercials made it look wild, kids' heads literally morphing into fruit. In real life, it was messy, but somehow that made it better. The flavor lineup, tropical, berry, and mystery, was a rainbow of artificial genius. Gushers weren't pretending to be healthy fruit snacks. They were proudly chaotic. They were the sticky symbol of a generation that didn't care about nutrition facts, only flavor explosions. Even today, just hearing the word Gushers brings back memories of after-school hangouts, juice-stained fingers, and that first bite of unstoppable, gooey joy. Sunbeam bread was the soft, golden standard of American wholesomeness. The smiling blonde girl on the package became a grocery store icon, her innocent face a promise of comfort and purity. Sunbeam loaves were light, fluffy, and perfect for sandwiches, the kind that left no crumbs behind. In a decade obsessed with domestic perfection, Sunbeam fit right in. Every slice looked identical, smooth, white, and dependable. It was the bread that defined an era, sliced evenly like life was supposed to be. One bite, and it tasted like order, the perfect symbol of the tidy, shining optimism that defined the 1950s. The brand didn't just sell bread, it sold reassurance that everything in life could be neat, clean, and deliciously under control. To mothers, it was trust in a bag. To children, it was the taste of home. It was bread you could count on, wrapped in nostalgia and printed with virtue. The packaging alone could transport shoppers to a simpler world where every meal felt wholesome. Sunbeam bread became part of the visual language of the 1950s, a reminder that even the smallest grocery item could carry the weight of the American dream, soft, warm, and endlessly comforting. Space food sticks were supposed to make you feel like an astronaut, but most people felt more like hostages to bad taste. Marketed as the food of the future, these chewy, tube-shaped snacks promised energy, convenience, and space-age nutrition. In reality, they were rubbery chocolate glue wrapped in foil, sticking to your teeth and your soul in equal measure. The packaging screamed adventure, but the flavor whispered punishment. They were dense enough to survive re-entry, yet fragile enough to crumble into brown dust if left in the sun. Parents kept buying them because kids loved the NASA tie-in, not because anyone actually wanted to eat them. It was the only snack that could make both astronauts and children question their life choices. They came in flavors like caramel, peanut butter, and chocolate, though none resembled anything found on Earth. Kids begged their parents for them, imagining themselves floating in zero gravity, only to realize astronauts probably ate better than this. The ads showed smiling families pretending this was adventure food, but in every kitchen, the reaction was the same: confusion, then regret. The texture was somewhere between an eraser and a protein bar that lost its will to live. They disappeared by the 1980s, only to return decades later as a nostalgia novelty. Because apparently, even bad memories can make money if you wrap them in silver. Victory Coffee Substitute was a bitter reminder of shortages made from roasted chicory root, barley, or other grains. Real coffee beans were scarce, and Americans had to accept that their morning cup would not taste the same. Grocery shelves stocked jars of this substitute, advertised as rich and satisfying, though few agreed. Some ads even claimed it was healthier than coffee, boasting that it was easy on the nerves and ideal for families. Homemakers were encouraged to brew it proudly, as though drinking it was a patriotic duty. For many, it became less about taste and more about keeping up a comforting ritual. Many said it tasted burnt or earthy, with none of the warmth that real coffee provided. Still, it gave people something hot to drink, and the ritual mattered more than the taste. Families drank it with milk or sweetened it with precious sugar to mask the bitterness. Some soldiers overseas grew used to it and drank it even after the war, but most abandoned it the moment real coffee returned. Victory coffee substitutes were strange, unwelcome, and unforgettable, tied forever to the sacrifices of the 1940s. Bologna ends from the deli were the mystery meat of childhood in poor households. At the end of the slicer's work, when the big log of bologna was too short to fit properly, the store sold the leftover ends at a discount. Families lined up for them, taking home bags of odd-shaped chunks. They were fried in a skillet, stacked between bread, or diced into casseroles. Sometimes the slices were thick and uneven, curling up in the pan like little cups of grease. Other times they were mashed into sandwiches with mustard, a meal that felt like a feast even though it cost pennies. Kids complained, but they ate every bite because meat was meat and bologna was king in a poor kitchen. Families stretched those ends as far as they could, using every scrap in lunches and dinners. It was cheap, salty, and filling, which was all that mattered. Today, it might seem funny, but for kids in the 1970s, the taste of fried bologna ends was unforgettable. If one man could be blamed for reshaping the American grocery store, it would be Harvard professor Mark Hegsted. In 1965, the Sugar Research Foundation paid Hegsted and two colleagues the equivalent of $48,000 to produce a literature review that blamed fat, not sugar, for coronary heart disease. The paper ran in the New England Journal of Medicine without disclosing the industry funding, and it became the scientific foundation for the 1977 dietary goals, the document that told every American family to cut saturated fat and red meat. Unprocessed red meat from the butcher, wrapped in white paper, had been a dense source of iron, zinc, B12, and complete protein. The Pure study, tracking over 135,000 people across 18 countries, found moderate unprocessed red meat consumption was not associated with higher cardiovascular death. Families left the meat counter and walked straight to the processed snack aisle, exactly as the sugar industry had planned. S and H green stamps at every register were one of the most exciting parts of grocery shopping in the 1970s, turning an ordinary trip into something that felt like earning tiny rewards for simply buying what your family needed. Cashiers handed over sheets of small green stamps with every purchase, and the number you received depended on how much you spent. Kids loved licking the back of each stamp and pressing them into collection books with pages that filled up slowly over weeks and months. Families kept those books in kitchen drawers or tucked beside the telephone, adding stamps after every trip with the patience of people building something meaningful one square at a time. Once a book was full, you took it to a redemption center and traded it for household items like toasters, lamps, blankets, or luggage. It felt like free money, even though every stamp was earned through spending. The excitement of flipping through the catalog and choosing a reward made the system feel generous and personal. Today, loyalty programs live inside apps and plastic cards, but nothing has matched the tactile satisfaction of peeling, licking, and pressing those green stamps into place. Ethylene dibromide was sprayed onto grain crops throughout the 1980s, protecting wheat, oats, corn, and rice from insects during storage and transport. The chemical worked so well at killing pests that it became standard practice across the agricultural industry, and residues made their way into cereals, breads, crackers, and countless other products lining grocery shelves. Families poured bowls of cereal every morning, packed sandwiches for school lunches, and served pasta for dinner without any idea that traces of a powerful fumigant came along with every serving. The grain looked clean, smelled normal, and passed through processing facilities that never questioned what invisible chemicals might be clinging to each kernel. But ethylene dibromide was eventually classified as a probable carcinogen, and regulators discovered that residues persisted far longer than anyone had assumed. The ban came swiftly once testing revealed how widespread the contamination had become. Manufacturers scrambled to find alternative pest control methods, and shoppers were left wondering how many years of breakfasts, lunches, and dinners had carried traces of something they were never told about. Hormone-injected super chickens were the pride of post-war America, a marvel of modern science that promised endless meat at low prices. Farmers injected birds with growth hormones to make them plumper and faster growing, cutting costs and feeding more people. Grocery stores proudly advertised bigger, better poultry that could roast in record time. The sight of a massive bird on the dinner table became a badge of success, a symbol that science and progress had conquered hunger. No one questioned why their chicken breasts had doubled in size or why the meat seemed strangely watery when cooked. They were too busy marveling at the miracle of abundance to see the price of tampering with nature. But what looked like progress soon sparked fear. Consumers began to wonder why their chickens looked unnaturally large and cooked down to almost nothing. Reports of hormone imbalances and health risks spread, and regulators stepped in. By the late 1950s, the practice was outlawed, leaving behind a trail of headlines and suspicion. The super chicken promised abundance but delivered anxiety instead. It became another cautionary tale of a century obsessed with faster, cheaper, and bigger, no matter the cost. Sharkleberry Fin Kool-Aid was neon pink madness in a pitcher. The flavor was supposed to be a mix of strawberry, banana, and orange, but it mostly tasted like sugar, water, and chaos. Its mascot, a surfing shark, became an icon of summertime fun, until the drink's dyes came under fire. The drink's color was so bright it could stain anything, countertops, clothes, even your tongue for a full day. Parents joked it could be used as a highlighter. But when new dye regulations came out, that joke stopped being funny. Health officials found the artificial coloring used didn't meet new safety standards, and suddenly, the shark had to swim away. Parents who once laughed at the color started reading labels for the first time. The FDA crackdown on certain dyes sealed its fate. Kool-Aid tried to replace it with other tropical flavors, but none had the same wild personality. For kids who grew up in the 1980s, Sharkleberry Fin wasn't just a drink. It was a sugar-fueled fantasy that glowed brighter than the sun and disappeared just as fast. The Kraft Cheese Singles campaign for bachelors was a masterclass in low expectations. The print ads showed rugged-looking men sitting alone at small kitchen tables, proudly layering bright orange cheese on plain white bread. "A real meal for a real man," the slogan read, as if independence were measured in slices. The tone was half macho, half melancholy. Kraft had found a way to romanticize loneliness through processed cheese. The men in the photos looked stoic, caught somewhere between pride and quiet despair. Their dinner was neon and square, but the message was crystal clear. Simplicity was masculine, and effort was weakness. Kraft didn't just sell cheese. It sold the comfort of not needing anyone else to cook for you. The ads leaned into the new modern man image, self-sufficient, efficient, and completely unbothered by the absence of utensils. Beneath the tough guy veneer, though, was something quietly sad. A generation of men taught that convenience was strength and effort was weakness. The cheese shone like vinyl, the bread drooped under the weight, and yet they called it dinner. Looking back, it's both funny and a little tragic. A reminder that even masculinity was something you could sell, one cheese slice at a time. Long before energy drinks became common, Jolt Cola was already rewriting the rules of caffeine. Its slogan said it all the sugar and twice the caffeine. In the 80s, that made it the ultimate rebel's drink. It was for gamers, coders, students pulling all-nighters, and anyone who wanted to feel like they were living on the edge of exhaustion. It tasted like liquid chaos, sweet enough to jolt you awake and strong enough to make your hands tremble after a few cans. Parents hated it, which only made it more appealing. For teenagers, drinking Jolt was not about taste. It was about rebellion. Supermarkets stacked cases of it, and teenagers wore their Jolt pride like a badge of honor. But as caffeine limits tightened and parents grew concerned about hyperactive kids bouncing off the walls, the drink became a symbol of excess. Regulators started cracking down, and Jolt slowly disappeared from the mainstream. It did not vanish with a bang. It just fizzled away like the last sip of a flat cola. Still, those who remember that metallic sweetness and electric buzz can tell you, it was more than a drink. It was pure adrenaline in a can, and once you tried it, nothing else quite hit the same. Ecto-Cooler High C was the ultimate 90s drink, radioactive green, sweet as liquid candy, and completely tied to Ghostbusters fever. Originally created as a tie-in for the cartoon The Real Ghostbusters, it quickly took on a life of its own. Kids didn't even need to know who Slimer was, they just knew that bright green meant fun. The citrusy tang wasn't natural, but it was delicious in a way only 90s sugar could be. The box design alone, complete with that grinning green ghost, made it feel like you were drinking from a comic book. Lunchboxes across the country glowed with Ecto-Cooler cartons, and playground trades were serious business. "You've got Ecto-Cooler? I'll give you 2 Capri Suns." It became a cultural artifact, bottled nostalgia for an age when color and chaos ruled snack time. When it was discontinued, fans mourned. When it was briefly re-released, adults lined up to buy it again, not for the taste, but for the memories it poured out. Biscuit baking mix was the kitchen shortcut every homemaker dreamed of. It came in a cheerful yellow box that promised fresh biscuits, pancakes, waffles, and dumplings, all in minutes. What once took time, skill, and a little luck could now be done with a single scoop and a splash of milk. In an age obsessed with efficiency and modern living, Bisquick was nothing short of a culinary revolution. It made breakfast spontaneous again, the kind of meal you could whip up before the coffee finished brewing. Every mom swore by it, and every kid learned to recognize the smell of Bisquick pancakes as a sign that morning had truly begun. The appeal was simple. It worked every time. No mess, no guessing, no failed dough. It turned the everyday cook into a reliable baker, something generations before could only dream of. Ads boasted that you could make anything from Bisquick, and they were not far off. From strawberry shortcake to pot pies, the mix became a silent partner in millions of kitchens. It was fast, flexible, and perfectly in tune with the rhythm of the modern family. Bisquick wasn't just flour and leavening. It was a box full of confidence for the 1950s homemaker, proof that convenience and care could live side by side on the dinner table. Libby's canned macaroni and cheese was everything wrong with the 1970s obsession with shelf-stable food. Open the can, and out slid a gelatinous orange blob that looked more like melted crayons than comfort food. It wobbled. It sloshed. It dared you to call it dinner. Steam rose from it like something being freed from a tomb. The cheese sauce was thick enough to patch drywall, and the noodles disintegrated on contact. Even the label warned to heat thoroughly, as if Libby's knew it was dangerous to eat cold. The only thing cheesier than the product was the marketing that called it homestyle. The noodles were limp, the sauce was sour, and the smell could ruin your appetite for a week. Yet somehow, Libby's ads promised creamy perfection, a phrase now used only in irony. It was a meal made for fallout shelters, not families. Parents bought it once, kids refused to eat it twice, and soon it vanished into canned food infamy. Today, it serves as a cautionary tale. Just because you can it, doesn't mean you should. Canned liver spread was another common but unusual sight in the 1940s grocery stores. With premium cuts of meat heavily rationed, organ meats became a more affordable option. Liver was inexpensive, full of iron, and easy to process into a spreadable paste that could be packaged in tins. Ads promoted it as a budget-friendly sandwich filler, perfect for school lunches or quick family meals. Some homemakers served it on crackers or toast to make it seem more appetizing, but the strong flavor was hard to disguise. Recipes often suggested mixing it with mustard or onions to mask the taste. For immigrant families who were already familiar with liver, the product was more welcome, but many Americans found it a stretch. Children especially turned up their noses at the metallic flavor, but hunger often won out over preference. After the war, canned liver spread stuck around in some markets but gradually faded from mainstream shelves, remembered as one of the stranger and less loved protein options of the decade. Long before artisanal chocolate bars cost $9, dark chocolate sat on grocery shelves as a simple, affordable baking ingredient, sold in blocks wrapped in paper with no pretense of luxury. When the low-fat movement swept through American kitchens, anything with fat in it became suspect, and chocolate, with its cocoa butter and saturated fat content, was categorized alongside ice cream and pastry as a treat to be avoided. What the dietary guidelines missed was the cocoa itself. Dark chocolate is rich in flavanols, a class of compounds that multiple clinical trials have shown to lower blood pressure, improve blood flow to the brain, and reduce insulin resistance. A Harvard study following over 50,000 women found that those who consumed flavanol-rich cocoa had measurably better vascular function. Baking chocolate from the 70s contained compounds that supplement companies now extract and sell in capsules at 10 times the cost. Bulk bins with no sneeze guards or gloves were one of those features in 1970s grocery stores that made shopping feel communal, casual, and unregulated. Wooden barrels and open metal bins sat along aisles, overflowing with loose candy, dried beans, rice, nuts, and baked goods that customers scooped out with shared metal scoops or grabbed with bare hands. Nobody wore gloves, and nobody worried about who touched what before them. The system was built on unspoken trust that everyone's hands were clean enough and intentions good enough. Kids plunged their arms into bins of penny candy, picking out pieces one by one, while parents weighed bags of trail mix or scooped flour into paper sacks. The smell of roasted peanuts, dried fruit, and raw grains mixed in a way that made the whole aisle feel alive. Store owners kept the bins full and the scoops clean, and that was considered more than enough. Today, health codes require sealed containers, sneeze guards, tongs, and gloves for anything sold in bulk, and the open barrel system that once made grocery shopping feel neighborly has given way to rules designed to protect what trust alone could not. Lead-soldered canned goods sat in pantries across the country throughout the 1980s, holding everything from vegetables and soups to fruits and baby formula. The seams holding these cans together were sealed with lead solder, standard practice for decades because lead was cheap and created airtight seals. Families stacked these cans in cupboards, trusting that the contents were safe because canned food was supposed to last without spoiling. But lead does not stay locked in metal. It slowly leaches into food inside, especially when contents are acidic like tomatoes or citrus juices. Children were particularly vulnerable because their bodies absorbed lead more easily, and even small amounts could affect brain development and learning. Researchers began connecting childhood lead exposure to canned foods, and the findings were alarming enough to force regulatory action. The ban on lead solder in food cans came swiftly once evidence became undeniable, but millions of families had already consumed decades' worth of contaminated meals without ever knowing. Those old cans became symbols of an era when convenience sometimes came with invisible costs no one expected. Saccharin-sweetened soft drinks were the original promise of guilt-free pleasure. The 1950s called them miracle sodas, offering sweetness without sugar, calories, or consequence. Housewives stocked their fridges with shiny cans of Diet Cola, proud to serve something modern and figure-friendly. It seemed like a revolution, proof that science could outsmart nature. But by the late 1960s, lab tests told a different story. Rats given high doses of saccharin developed bladder cancer, and public trust shattered overnight. The reaction was immediate. Panicked consumers poured out bottles, and news anchors warned of poison in your pop. It became the first true food scare of the modern age, and every can of soda turned into a question of faith. People learned that even sweetness, when manufactured, could carry a sting. Though later research softened the panic, the damage was done. The first wave of diet drinks disappeared, leaving behind fear and confusion. People realized that artificial could mean dangerous, and zero-calorie might come with a hidden cost. Saccharin eventually returned under tight regulation, but it never regained the innocent glow it once had. What began as liberation through chemistry ended as a cautionary tale of too much faith in innovation. Canned beets or carrots were not anyone's favorite, but they made the plate look complete. You opened the can, drained the liquid, and served them straight, or maybe warmed them in a little butter. They were soft, too soft sometimes, but you ate them anyway, because in the 1970s, getting vegetables meant buying what you could afford, not what looked best. They added color, nutrition, and just enough balance to a meal made of starch and meat. You did not love them, but you learned to work with them. You mashed them into other dishes when the kids refused to touch them. You glazed them with sugar and crossed your fingers they would pass for something better. Some cans were tastier than others, depending on the brand and the batch. The smell when you opened them was never great, but it faded fast. You knew they were overcooked, but at least they were cooked. They rounded out a meal that might otherwise be missing something green or orange. A little sugar for the beets, a little brown sugar for the carrots. They weren't perfect, but they were enough. Canned vegetables filled the gap between what you wanted and what you had, and they did it quietly. Before he crashed through walls and shouted his way into pop culture, the Kool-Aid Man was just a pitcher. In the early 1970s, the ads featured a faceless glass jug of bright red juice, smiling at children with no eyes, no mouth, and no mercy. The tagline, "Cool it up," was meant to sound hip and modern, but the result was unsettling, a mix between a party invitation and a threat. Children in these ads danced in slow motion while the faceless pitcher poured itself into glasses as if Kool-Aid had achieved sentience. There was no mascot, no character, just a glowing red liquid promising instant happiness in powder form. Parents were told it was the fun way to keep kids cool, never mind the sugar high that followed. Looking back, these early ads feel like the calm before the storm, the era when Kool-Aid was trying to figure out what joy looked like and accidentally landed on something vaguely sinister. When the Kool-Aid Man finally appeared, smashing through walls like a suburban superhero, it almost felt like the drink itself had escaped its glassy prison. Nothing screams health and hedonism quite like disco dancers celebrating imitation bacon. Before there was a health craze about energy drinks, there were sodas laced with brominated vegetable oil, better known as BVO. Found in citrus favorites like Mountain Dew and Sun Drop, it was used to keep the flavor evenly mixed. For decades, nobody questioned it. Kids chugged neon green sodas at arcades, parents packed them into lunchboxes, and commercials promised unstoppable energy. It was the soda of summer vacations, backyard barbecues, and glowing green tongues. People had no idea that the same ingredient keeping the citrus oil afloat was slowly building up in their bodies over time. Then scientists revealed that bromine, one of the elements in BVO, could build up in the human body and cause serious health problems. Suddenly, the familiar fizz turned into fear. The Food and Drug Administration banned its use, forcing companies to change their recipes. But for people who grew up in the 80s and 90s, that old taste still lingers in memory. It was sharp, tangy, and just a bit radioactive in color, like drinking liquid lightning from a bottle. It was the flavor of youth, risk, and everything that felt a little too extreme for its own good. Surge Soda was the liquid embodiment of the word extreme. Released in the mid-90s as Coca-Cola's answer to Mountain Dew, it came in a neon green can that looked like it could power a skateboard. The drink promised adrenaline in a bottle, an energy boost before energy drinks were even a thing. Every can felt like an invitation to chaos, an explosion of sugar, caffeine, and citrus that hit harder than anything else on the shelf. The ads made you feel like cracking open a Surge could transform an ordinary afternoon into an action movie. For kids growing up in the 90s, drinking one felt like joining a secret club of unstoppable energy. Its marketing screamed rebellion, all graffiti logos, explosions, and kids jumping off rooftops. Every gulp was like tasting citrus chaos. Parents called it caffeinated sugar water, but that only made it cooler. Surge was banned in schools, whispered about like contraband, and adored by every kid who wanted to feel like a daredevil. It was more than soda. It was an attitude, a bright green middle finger to moderation. Even now, people remember that electric buzz, that rush of flavor that somehow felt alive. It wasn't just a drink. It was a moment in time bottled up for a generation that refused to slow down. Surge didn't just wake you up. It woke up an era. And when it vanished in the early 2000s, it left behind an entire generation of nostalgic fans who swore no drink has ever come close. For a moment, Surge wasn't just a beverage. It was the soundtrack to growing up loud. Kool-Aid wasn't just a drink. It was a ritual. Every kid in the 1950s knew the sound of that powder hitting a pitcher and the rush of color swirling through the water. With just sugar, water, and imagination, a world of flavor appeared for pennies. It was bright, sweet, and affordable, the perfect symbol of middle-class fun. The first sip was pure excitement, too sweet, too colorful, and somehow perfect every single time. It wasn't just a beverage, it was joy in motion, stirred up by tiny hands and summer light. Kids loved it because they could make it themselves, stirring with wide grins as the water turned electric red or neon green. Parents loved it because it brought laughter to the table without breaking the grocery budget. Kool-Aid was a kind of magic, the ability to make something wonderful from nearly nothing. It was the taste of summer, birthday parties, and endless afternoons. The smiling face on the packet was more than a mascot. It was a promise of joy in liquid form. In an era of post-war optimism, Kool-Aid was liquid happiness poured straight from the pitcher, a reminder that even small things could make life feel extraordinary. Salad in a can was the era's saddest attempt at health food. Lettuce, dressing, and despair sealed tight in tin. Each can promised a fresh, balanced meal that could be stored for months, which should have been the first red flag. Once opened, you were greeted by limp, brownish leaves drowning in vinegar-scented goo. The smell hit first, a sharp metallic tang that made you question your life choices. The dressing had congealed into something resembling glue, and the lettuce was so wilted it practically begged to be buried. Advertisers posed models on picnic blankets holding open cans, pretending to enjoy it. The only thing fresher than the salad was the regret that followed. The tagline was "Salad for busy people," which really meant people who have given up. The taste was like sour dishwater with a hint of aluminum, and yet it was marketed with bright smiles and picnic scenes. It was meant to bring freshness to the shelf-stable revolution, but instead, it buried salad's reputation for an entire generation. Even cats turned their noses up at it. People quickly realized that lettuce, nature's most fragile food, did not belong anywhere near a can opener. In the age of innovation, this one proved that not everything needed to be preserved. Dehydrated soup bricks were another strange but practical item from wartime grocery stores. These compressed cubes or rectangles contained dried vegetables, bouillon, and grains, ready to be boiled into soup. They were promoted as a miracle of convenience. Just drop one into water and dinner was served. Some even came with patriotic names like Victory Soup, promising both comfort and efficiency. Community cookbooks suggested adding scraps of onion, potatoes, or cabbage to make the broth heartier. For many families, these bricks became a way to turn almost nothing into something that could feed a crowd. The texture and taste were far from gourmet, but families welcomed the ease. They often added scraps of meat, potatoes, or garden vegetables to bulk up the meal. Children remembered the bricks dissolving into murky broth with an odd smell, but it was warm and filling. For soldiers and civilians alike, they became a familiar staple. Today we have instant soup powders and packaged mixes, but the old bricks feel almost medieval. They were practical, strange, and a symbol of a world learning to stretch every resource. Store-branded ice milk instead of ice cream was the closest poor kids often got to dessert. True ice cream cost more, but ice milk came cheaper, often in large cardboard tubs. It was thinner, less creamy, and melted faster. But to kids, it was heaven. Spoons clinked against bowls as kids piled it high, often doused in chocolate syrup or sprinkles to mask the lack of richness. The flavor sometimes tasted watered down, but when it hit your tongue cold and sweet, you did not care. Families celebrated birthdays and holidays with ice milk, treating it like the finest dessert in the world. It was a compromise, but one that made sense when money was tight. Every poor kid remembered crowding around the freezer, hoping there was still a scoop left in the tub. For many, that ice milk was the taste of childhood. The campaign to replace natural fats with industrial ones did not start in the 70s. It started in 1911 when Procter & Gamble introduced Crisco, a product made by forcing hydrogen gas through cottonseed oil to turn a liquid into a solid. The process, called hydrogenation, created the trans fats later linked to hundreds of thousands of heart disease deaths. Crisco's marketing was ruthless. The company gave away free cookbooks to newlywed women, hired home economists to promote the product in cooking classes, and framed pure pork lard as old-fashioned and unsanitary. By the 70s, lard had nearly vanished from American grocery stores. What nobody disclosed was that lard is naturally rich in vitamin D, has a balanced fatty acid profile, and produces a flakier pie crust than any shortening ever could. Lard was safe. Its replacement was not. No expiration dates on most packaged foods meant that families in the 1970s relied entirely on their senses to decide whether something was still safe to eat. You opened a can of soup, sniffed it, and if it smelled fine, dinner was served. Boxes of crackers, bags of flour, jars of peanut butter, and cans of fruit sat in pantries for months, sometimes years, without a printed date telling you when the food had crossed a line. People trusted their instincts because there was nothing else to trust. If bread felt stale, you toasted it. If cheese turned a shade you did not recognize, you cut off the edge and kept the rest. Families managed their kitchens with a quiet confidence that came from generations of doing exactly the same thing. Nobody panicked over a missing label because labels simply did not carry that information yet. The idea of tossing perfectly good food because a printed date said so would have seemed wasteful and absurd. Today, expiration dates govern almost every purchase, and shelves are cleared based on stamps that sometimes reflect quality rather than safety. Back then, your nose, your eyes, and your common sense were the only tools you needed. Unpasteurized raw milk was still available in many grocery stores during the 1980s, sitting in refrigerated sections alongside pasteurized cartons. Some shoppers specifically sought it out, believing it was healthier, more natural, and closer to what their grandparents drank straight from the farm. The creamy texture, richer taste, and idea that nothing had been processed made raw milk feel wholesome in a way modern dairy did not. Parents poured it over cereal, blended it into smoothies, and gave it to children who had no idea they were drinking something potentially dangerous. But unpasteurized milk can carry bacteria, including Salmonella, E. coli, and Listeria, pathogens that pasteurization was specifically designed to kill. Outbreaks traced back to raw milk sickened families across the country, and some cases turned severe or even fatal. Regulators responded by tightening restrictions until raw milk became illegal in most grocery stores nationwide. Today, finding it requires visiting farms directly or navigating complex state laws, a far cry from when it sat casually on refrigerator shelves waiting for anyone to take it home. Aerosol cheese in steel cans was the kind of futuristic food that only the 1950s could have dreamed up. It was creamy, convenient, and somehow scientific. All the things that modern America was obsessed with at the time. Housewives marveled at how it could be sprayed directly onto crackers, celery sticks, or even straight into the mouth of a giggling child. It felt like progress you could taste. No knife, no cleanup, no effort. The secret behind the spray was pressure from chlorofluorocarbons, or CFCs, the same chemicals used in aerosol hairspray and refrigeration. They made the cheese foam perfectly, airy and light, and gave it that signature hiss when you pressed the nozzle. Nobody thought twice about it until scientists in the 1970s revealed that CFCs were eating away at the ozone layer, literally tearing a hole in the atmosphere. What had once been the pride of kitchen technology suddenly became an environmental villain. The cheese itself wasn't the problem. It was what made it spray that turned it into a global issue. Companies scrambled to replace the formula, switching to safer propellants, but the reputation stuck. The phrase "cheese in a can" went from novelty to punchline. For those who lived through its rise, it will always taste like nostalgia and a little bit of guilt. Carnation breakfast bars were supposed to revolutionize mornings, all the nutrition of breakfast in a single bar. They didn't. Instead, they crumbled like chalk before you even got them out of the wrapper. People described the texture as dry dirt held together by sadness. Even the chocolate coating couldn't save them. It melted faster than the bar fell apart. Some people tried microwaving them for softness, but that only made the smell worse. People joked that they were eating drywall, with less flavor. The bars were supposed to provide protein and energy, but most of it ended up as crumbs in car seats and lunchboxes. Even dunking them in milk didn't help. They just dissolved into sludge. They were dry, gritty, and somehow both sticky and powdery at once. The kind of food that left you thirstier than before you ate it. Parents packed them for convenience. Kids traded them for anything edible. Carnation promised energy that lasts all day. But most people were hungry again by 9 a.m. The bars came in flavors like chocolate chip and peanut butter, but they all tasted like sawdust with ambition. They joined the long line of 1970s food that valued science over flavor, proving once again that complete nutrition means nothing if you can't swallow it. The Swanson Modern Family Feast campaign was a love letter to convenience disguised as progress. The print ads and commercials showed a picture-perfect family smiling around foil trays, each meal divided neatly into mashed potatoes, green beans, and a mysterious brown entree. "No dishes, no fuss," the tagline boasted, as if effort itself were the enemy. The mother beamed, holding a steaming tray like a trophy of liberation. For the first time, dinner didn't require pots, pans, or patience, just faith in the microwave and a tolerance for lukewarm gravy. The awkwardness came from the contrast between the cheerful tone and the bleak reality. Everyone eating alone together, focused on their own tray. The 1970s promised that technology would bring families closer, but the Swanson ad shows the opposite, a quiet distance hidden behind the glow of convenience. Watching it today, it feels less like progress and more like a perfectly preserved moment of lonely efficiency. Ecto Cooler. Hi-C was pure childhood magic poured into a box. Inspired by the Ghostbusters craze of the 80s, it glowed with a radioactive green that no fruit on earth had ever seen. It tasted like tangerine mixed with nostalgia and a hint of Saturday morning cartoons. Every kid in America wanted it in their lunchbox, and every parent knew exactly what that neon color meant: artificial dyes and plenty of sugar. It stained your tongue, your clothes, and sometimes even the kitchen counter, but no one cared. Kids sipped it like it was a secret potion, their own piece of Ghostbusters magic in liquid form. Years later, when regulations began restricting synthetic food colorings linked to hyperactivity and health concerns, the drink quietly disappeared. But it left behind a generation of kids who still swear it tasted better than anything since. For many, it was not just juice. It was a piece of their childhood, a reminder of how fun could come in the strangest colors. Even now, when someone finds an old box online or a commemorative re-release, it feels like opening a time capsule from a brighter, weirder world where even your drink looked like slime. Crystal Pepsi was a bold experiment that tasted like the future but confused almost everyone. A completely clear cola, it was marketed as pure, clean, and revolutionary. People expected a citrus drink, but nope, it was just Pepsi, without the caramel color. The first sip was disorienting. Your brain said lemon lime, but your taste buds screamed cola. It was strange, fascinating, and oddly addictive. The commercials were epic too, complete with Van Halen soundtracks and shining city skylines. Crystal Pepsi became a cultural flashpoint, a soda that defied expectations and still managed to make history. It didn't last long, less than 2 years, but it left an unforgettable impression. Decades later, it returned for nostalgic fans who remembered the thrill of drinking something that looked wrong but felt so right. It was weird, it was wonderful, and it was unmistakably 90s. Campbell's cream of mushroom soup was the secret backbone of 1950s cooking. Found in every pantry, it wasn't just soup. It was the glue holding casseroles together across suburban America. A single can could stretch leftovers, feed a family, and make almost anything taste homemade. Housewives mixed it with tuna, green beans, chicken, or rice, creating dishes that were easy, creamy, and dependable. It was food engineering disguised as comfort food. For many families, that can represented more than a shortcut. It was a sign that even the busiest mother could still serve a meal made with love. It was innovation meeting affection, where a can opener replaced a rolling pin and nobody minded the trade. Every church potluck and holiday table owed something to that red and white can. It wasn't glamorous, but it was reliable, a flavor that said home in every bite. The genius was in its versatility. It made ordinary ingredients feel indulgent. For women balancing new appliances and old expectations, Campbell's was a quiet helper in the background, saving time and sanity. Its rich, salty aroma defined what dinner smelled like in post-war kitchens. By the time you saw that familiar label, you already knew it was going to be good. Campbell's cream of mushroom soup turned cooking from a chore into a shortcut, and America gladly took the deal. Tang breakfast cereal was what happened when someone took the phrase "part of a complete breakfast" far too literally. The famous orange drink powder got a crunchy upgrade because apparently drinking it wasn't enough. It came in small, sugary nuggets that promised the flavor of sunshine and delivered the taste of battery acid. The first crunch was shocking, sharp citrus with a metallic aftertaste that burned like orange cleaner. Within seconds, the cereal disintegrated into orange foam, turning milk into a radioactive sludge. Kids dared each other to finish a bowl, while parents quietly questioned humanity's progress. Even Tang's creators pretended it never happened. Pouring milk over it turned breakfast into a chemical experiment. The milk fizzed, the cereal melted, and nothing about it felt safe. Kids were curious once, parents never twice. NASA may have used Tang in space, but this version belonged in the trash. It was sweet, sour, and somehow both dry and sticky. The only thing this cereal fueled was regret. Tang tried to conquer breakfast twice, once as a drink, once as a disaster, and both times it left a bad taste in history. Dried milk tablets were one of the strangest ways families in the 1940s tried to get their nutrition. Fresh milk was difficult to keep and often reserved for children or soldiers, so companies offered a substitute: milk that had been dehydrated and pressed into chalky little tablets. They were sold in tins or small cardboard boxes, marketed as convenient, portable nutrition for the whole family. Parents were told they could pack them in lunch boxes or carry them on the go as a source of protein and vitamins. The reality was less appealing. The tablets were hard, crumbly, and left a dry film on the tongue. Many children hated the taste, but with so few options, they had little choice but to choke them down. Cookbooks sometimes recommended crushing the tablets into water to make a makeshift milk drink, though the flavor was bitter and strange. Despite all this, the government and food companies promoted them as modern science at work, a way to ensure no one went without milk entirely. After the war, these tablets disappeared quickly, remembered mostly as a wartime compromise no one was eager to relive. Generic cola in black and white cans was a true mark of poor shopping trips. The plain white can with blocky black letters simply said COLA and nothing more. It was stacked high in discount aisles, promising a cheaper option than Coca-Cola or Pepsi. Poor families grabbed cases of it, knowing it would never quite taste the same as the real thing. The fizz was weak, the sweetness flat, but it was soda, and that was enough to make kids feel like they were part of the fun. Every once in a while, you got a can that seemed oddly metallic, but nobody poured it out. Parties, cookouts, and family nights featured those plain cans lined up on tables like silent guests. They were stripped of branding and glamour, but they delivered what mattered: a sugary, carbonated drink that felt like a treat. Kids rolled their eyes when friends brought over Pepsi, but at home, generic cola was good enough. To this day, people smile when they remember those plain cans, symbols of thrift and compromise. For pennies a pound, marrow bones sat in the butcher's display case through the 50s and 60s, bought by home cooks who understood that a slow-simmered stock was the backbone of real cooking. By the 80s, the bones had vanished from most supermarkets, replaced by bouillon cubes packed with sodium and monosodium glutamate. The homemade broth those bones produced contained collagen, glycine, proline, and glutamine, amino acids that modern research has connected to improved gut lining integrity, reduced joint inflammation, and better sleep quality. The gelatin that formed when a proper stock cooled in the refrigerator was a protein source no factory-made cube could replicate. Bone broth is now a $4 billion wellness industry, sold in sleek cartons at $10 a quart to people whose parents tossed those same bones in the trash because a powder from a box seemed faster and more modern. Buying meat wrapped only in butcher paper was one of those rituals that made grocery shopping in the 1970s feel deeply personal and surprisingly intimate. You walked up to the glass case, pointed to the cut you wanted, and watched as the butcher pulled it out with bare hands, slapped it onto the scale, and wrapped it tightly in thick white paper before scribbling the weight and price with a grease pencil. There were no vacuum-sealed trays, no plastic film, and no styrofoam bases. The paper absorbed the juices, and by the time you got home, the bottom of the bag often carried a faint pink stain nobody thought twice about. Families trusted the butcher the way they trusted their doctor because the man behind the counter knew your name, your preferences, and exactly how thick you liked your pork chops. Kids pressed their faces against the cold glass, staring at the rows of cuts lined up like treasures on display. The smell of fresh meat, cold steel, and sawdust filled that section of the store in a way modern aisles cannot replicate. Today, everything is sealed, labeled, and traced to a plant. But back then, the butcher's word was all the food safety you ever needed. High nitrite processed meats were lunchbox favorites throughout the 1980s, filling sandwiches and sizzling on breakfast plates without anyone worrying about what kept them so pink. Hot dogs, bacon, deli ham, and bologna relied on sodium nitrite to maintain color, extend shelf life, and prevent dangerous bacteria. Parents packed these meats into school lunches, believing they provided protein and convenience in one neat package. Families consumed them at barbecues, ball games, and weeknight dinners without hesitation. But nitrites can transform into nitrosamines during cooking or digestion, and researchers linked these compounds to increased cancer risks in the digestive system. The more processed meat people ate, the higher their exposure became, and children who grew up on daily servings absorbed more than anyone realized. Regulators eventually stepped in with strict limits on how much nitrite manufacturers could add, forcing companies to reformulate recipes. The hot dogs and bacon of today contain far less preservative than their 80s counterparts, but the memory of those heavily preserved meats lingers as a warning about trusting convenience too completely. Asbestos oven mitts and hot pads were marketed as indestructible. Advertisements promised they could handle any heat without ever catching fire. Housewives trusted them, pulling casseroles and roasts straight from the oven with confidence. It was the post-war era of atomic age optimism, when scientific materials meant progress and danger felt impossible. The word asbestos was said with pride. It sounded technical, modern, and safe. Nobody imagined that the same mineral used in insulation and factories could turn a kitchen into a slow-motion health hazard. The secret was asbestos, a mineral that could resist flames but released deadly fibers every time it was touched. Each squeeze, each fold, released invisible dust into the air. Over time, those fibers lodged deep in the lungs, leading to mesothelioma and other fatal illnesses decades later. The danger was silent and patient, hiding behind the promise of safety. By the time the truth came out, many who used them daily were already sick. Asbestos was once hailed as the perfect material for modern living. It ended up becoming one of history's most infamous killers. Those oven mitts, sold with warmth and trust, literally took people's breath away. Boxed cornflakes, store brand of course, were breakfast on a budget. They came in plain boxes with boring fonts and nothing inside but the flakes and maybe some cereal dust. They were crunchy for the first 30 seconds, then turned soggy if you were too slow. You poured sugar on them if you could. Otherwise, you powered through. They were not exciting, but they were consistent. You ate them dry, you crushed them into meatloaf, and you used them as filler when the good cereal ran out. No mascots, no games on the back of the box, just cereal that did what it needed to do. You reused the box for school projects, wrapping paper, or organizing drawers. The bag inside was always noisy and impossible to open cleanly. You knew the bottom half would be mostly crumbs, but you kept going. They sat high on the pantry shelf because no one ever snuck them for a midnight snack. They were bland, honest, and there for you when sweeter cereals vanished too fast. Sometimes you mixed them with another cereal just to give them a second chance. No one asked for them, but no one threw them away. Cornflakes taught you that reliable food is underrated. They were plain, honest food in a world that demanded you stretch every dollar. Boxed cornflakes did not make you feel rich, but they did make sure you were fed. Cool Whip commercials of the 1970s were small theater performances about deception. The tagline, "Tastes just like real whipped cream," was delivered with such conviction that even the actors looked surprised. The ads usually opened with a smiling mother serving dessert and someone gasping, "You made fresh whipped cream?" Cue the laughter, cue the reveal, cue the unsettling close-up of Cool Whip glistening like plastic snow. What makes these commercials so awkward isn't the product, it's the drama. Everyone acted like discovering imitation cream was a spiritual experience. Housewives were promised elegance without effort, a modern miracle that replaced tradition with convenience. But underneath the charm was an odd tension. A culture so obsessed with speed it forgot what cream even tasted like. Watching them now, you can almost hear the sigh between lines. Is this what progress tastes like? A spoonful of nostalgia, equal parts sweet and artificial. Crystal Pepsi was the drink that tried to reinvent soda and accidentally confused everyone. In the early 1990s, Pepsi wanted to symbolize purity and transparency, so they made a cola with no color at all. It looked like sparkling water but tasted like Pepsi, and that contradiction fascinated people. People stared at it on shelves, unsure if it was a prank or a promise, and yet curiosity always won. For a brief moment, it felt like drinking the future, a crystal-clear revolution in a brown-colored world. Even opening the bottle had a sense of wonder, like unveiling a secret that was hiding in plain sight. For a short while, it became a phenomenon. Commercials promised a clean, futuristic world in a clear bottle. But the illusion shattered quickly. Many consumers thought it was diet soda, while others complained that it tasted off, even though the formula was almost identical. Mislabeling, marketing confusion, and failed freshness tests in certain regions sealed its fate. It vanished almost as quickly as it appeared. Still, for those who remember it, Crystal Pepsi was unforgettable, not for its flavor, but for its ambition. It was a reminder that sometimes, when you try too hard to make something clear, you end up losing what made it real. French Toast Crunch was Saturday morning comfort in a cereal box. Every piece looked like a tiny slice of golden toast, glistening with cinnamon sugar coating. It smelled like a breakfast diner in your kitchen. When you poured milk over it, the scent filled the air like maple syrup on a hot griddle. The crunch was perfect, the sweetness just enough to keep you sneaking handfuls straight from the box. It wasn't breakfast, it was dessert disguised as cereal. The ads showed cartoon slices of toast dancing across screens, and every kid who tried it swore it tasted like happiness. Parents might have rolled their eyes at the sugar content, but it didn't matter. For the kids who grew up with it, French Toast Crunch wasn't just cereal. It was a ritual, a memory you could taste. When it disappeared, people missed it like an old friend, and when it returned years later, it proved that nostalgia really does come with syrup. Minute rice was the miracle of the instant age. No more boiling, stirring, or waiting. It promised perfectly fluffy rice in 5 minutes flat. To a 1950s homemaker juggling kids, appliances, and expectations, it was nothing short of a revelation. Convenience had become a national value, and minute rice was its purest expression. It was the future poured out of a box, where effort and patience were replaced by trust in modern technology. For a generation that had watched the world move faster every year, even dinner had to keep up. It turned cooking into something nearly effortless, giving families more time to sit, talk, and eat together. It was the kind of progress that fit neatly in a box and sat proudly on the shelf beside all the other modern miracles. Rice, once a tricky side dish, was suddenly foolproof. You just added water and trust. The packaging practically beamed confidence. This was the rice of the future. And in the hands of post-war America, that mattered more than flavor. It was about consistency, control, and the comfort of knowing dinner would always turn out right. Minute rice wasn't just food, it was peace of mind, one scoop at a time. Dieter's Shimmer gelatin drink was a miracle of marketing and a nightmare of taste. It promised to replace entire meals with a sparkling, jiggling liquid delight, words that should never describe food. The bottle shimmered like glitter in suspension, as if you were about to drink a lava lamp. It was made from sweetened gelatin water, blended with artificial fruit flavors so intense they made your tongue tingle. When you shook the bottle, it sparkled under the light, mesmerizing, until you remembered you had to drink it. The consistency clung to your throat like slime, sliding down slowly as if reconsidering the journey. Early testers described it as sparkly regret in a bottle. Yet somehow it was marketed as glamorous, the disco drink for dieters. The texture was somewhere between cough syrup and melted jello, and the aftertaste stayed for hours. Dieter's hoped it would help them feel glamorous while losing weight, but it mostly made them question their life choices. The company boasted that it was the future of nutrition, which might have been true in a dystopian sense. Even the label couldn't decide whether to promise health or fashion, as if a disco ball and a diet book had a baby. Shimmer proved that the 1970s could sell anything, as long as it sparkled. Soy Victory sausage was one of the strangest meats to line shelves during the 1940s. With real meat in short supply, companies blended soy flour, fillers, and scraps into sausages that were meant to stretch rations further. These sausages often looked the part, but once cooked, they revealed their odd texture and flavor. Many described them as rubbery or bland, but they were cheap and filling, and that mattered more than taste. The government promoted them as patriotic, urging families to embrace soy as a way to help win the war. Cookbooks included recipes that added onions, breadcrumbs, or herbs to improve the flavor. Families learned to slice them into casseroles or stews where the strangeness could be hidden. For many, it was their first real exposure to soy as food, and it stuck in memory as both peculiar and necessary. Soy sausages never became a beloved staple, but they were a symbol of sacrifice at the dinner table. Coffee cans for storing flour or sugar were a sight you could find on any kitchen counter. Once the last spoonful of Maxwell House or Folgers was brewed, the metal can was scrubbed clean and filled with dry goods. The plastic snap-on lid kept everything fresh enough, and the can itself was nearly indestructible. Poor families stacked them on shelves, labeled with masking tape and marker to tell sugar from flour, rice, or cornmeal. No matter how many times they were washed, they always carried that lingering coffee smell, which sometimes flavored the flour if it sat too long. But nobody minded. It was thrift in action, and that mattered more than taste. Kids grew up recognizing the sound of those plastic lids popping open as part of the rhythm of cooking at home. They doubled as storage for nails, screws, crayons, or buttons, making them as much workshop and craft supplies as kitchenware. Lined up in neat rows, they became a badge of pride, practical, reused, and full of possibility. Buying new canisters was out of the question when every household already had a pile of coffee cans ready to go. The 1977 McGovern Committee branded salt a killer, and what followed was decades of blanket low-sodium advice that shaped government nutrition programs, hospital cafeterias, and every food label in the grocery store. The message was simple: sodium raises blood pressure, high blood pressure causes heart disease, so everyone should eat less salt. The science, however, was far more complicated than the slogan. A 2018 study published in The Lancet, part of the massive Pure study tracking over 135,000 people across 18 countries, found that very low sodium intake was associated with an increased risk of cardiovascular events and death. The relationship turned out to be a U-shaped curve, dangerous at both extremes. Meanwhile, the unrefined sea salts and mineral salts used for thousands of years contained trace amounts of magnesium, potassium, and calcium that industrial table salt had been stripped of entirely. produce sold loose with no PLU stickers or packaging was the standard in 1970s grocery stores, where fruits and vegetables arrived in crates and were piled on open displays without a label in sight. You picked up an apple, turned it in your hand, sniffed it if you wanted, and placed it in a thin paper bag torn from a roll above the bin. Nobody scanned anything because there was nothing to scan. Cashiers knew the price of every item by memory or glanced at a chart beside the register. Tomatoes were sold by the pound, corn by the ear, and watermelons by the thump test and nothing else. There were no country of origin labels, no organic certifications, and no wax coatings for shelf appeal. What you saw was what you got, and what you got was whatever local farms or distributors delivered that week. Kids grabbed grapes from the pile and ate them before reaching the register, and parents barely noticed because the produce section ran on a kind of honor system. Today, every piece of fruit carries a tiny sticker with a code that tells the register what it costs and where it came from. The simplicity of the old way feels almost impossible now. Saccharin products carried bright pink warning labels throughout the 1980s, telling consumers that the artificial sweetener had been shown to cause cancer in laboratory animals. Despite the warning, diet sodas, sugar-free gums, and tabletop sweetener packets containing saccharin remained on grocery shelves because regulators stopped short of an outright ban. Shoppers stood in checkout lines holding products that openly admitted potential danger, weighing the risks of cancer against the desire to avoid calories. Eaters continued using saccharin anyway, stirring those little pink packets into coffee and tea while trying not to think about what the labels said. Parents gave children sugar-free treats that carried the same warnings, hoping the risks were exaggerated or that small amounts would not matter. The strange limbo lasted for years, with saccharin existing in a gray zone between safety and prohibition. Eventually, further research cast doubt on whether the animal studies applied to humans, and the warning labels were quietly removed. But for an entire generation, saccharin represented the unsettling reality that grocery stores could sell products openly labeled as potentially carcinogenic. Butter-flavored margarine was a 1950s wonder, spreadable, cheap, and promoted as a heart-healthy alternative to butter. Housewives embraced it as the modern choice, the sign of progress in every kitchen. Its golden color and smooth texture promised indulgence without guilt. It was advertised in bright magazines beside smiling families and spotless kitchens, the perfect picture of American prosperity. Scientists and companies alike told the public it was the smarter fat, a scientific marvel that separated them from the old-fashioned ways of their parents. But science back then cared more about selling innovation than testing its safety. The secret behind its miracle formula was trans fats, the industrial oils hydrogenated to stay solid at room temperature. For decades, Americans slathered their toast and fried their eggs in it, believing they were doing their hearts a favor. Then the studies came, and the truth was hard to swallow. Trans fats were worse than the butter they replaced, clogging arteries and shortening lives. By the time it was banned, it had already shaped the diet of a generation. Butter-flavored margarine was more than a product. It was a lie sold with a smile. Saltine crackers were never the star, but they were always in the picture. The box lasted forever and the sleeves got stale faster than you could finish them, but you kept them anyway. They were there when the bread ran out, there when you were sick, there when dinner needed a filler. You spread peanut butter, dipped them in soup, crumbled them into meatloaf. Dry and plain and dusty on your tongue, but still, somehow, comforting. You lined them up on a plate like a snack tray when there was nothing else to serve. They broke easily in your hand, but never let you down in a recipe. Sometimes they were the only side dish on the table. You crunched them late at night when the house was quiet and your stomach was not. No one ever thanked them, but no one ever threw them out either. They lived at the back of every pantry like a safety net made of salt and starch. You wrapped them in napkins and tucked them in lunchboxes like they were gold. Sometimes dinner was just a few saltines and whatever you could scrounge. They held everything together, even when everything felt like it was falling apart. Saltines were not fancy. They were just always there. If you ever doubted the creativity of 1970s advertisers, Look no further than the Vienna sausage party platter. Canned meat was molded, skewered, and stacked into elaborate towers, decorated with pineapple rings, maraschino cherries, and cocktail umbrellas. The ad proudly declared it the fancy new way to entertain. Imagine inviting your neighbors over and unveiling a pyramid of glistening sausages held together with toothpicks and wishful thinking. These ads treated canned meat like fine charcuterie, photographed under soft lighting to make it look glamorous instead of greasy. The guests in the pictures always looked thrilled, one hand clutching a sausage tower, the other pretending not to notice the gelatin glaze forming at room temperature. This was food that dared you to smile while you chewed. Beneath the bright optimism was a deeper truth about the 1970s. Processed food wasn't just convenient, it was a badge of progress. The more artificial it looked, the more futuristic it felt. And maybe that's why the Vienna Sausage Tower remains one of the funniest, most haunting culinary artifacts of the decade. There was a time when ketchup came in colors you would never believe. Green Heinz EZ Squirt hit shelves in the early 2000s and turned every kid's meal into a wild art project. The company wanted to make eating fun again. Bright purple, blue, and green sauces that squirted out of rocket-shaped bottles. Parents bought them by the dozen, and kids painted their French fries and hot dogs like edible canvases. The ketchup splattered across plates and lunch tables, creating masterpieces no art class could ever allow. Children squealed with laughter, while parents wondered how they would ever clean it off. For a brief, chaotic moment, dinner felt like finger painting with food, but the colors came at a cost. Those neon hues were powered by synthetic dyes later linked to behavioral issues and health risks in children. When regulations tightened around artificial food colorings, Heinz quietly pulled the plug. The bottles vanished, leaving behind only memories of bright green burgers and blue spaghetti nights. It was a strange experiment in marketing, one that proved just how far people would go for a dash of novelty at the dinner table. Still, anyone who grew up with EZ Squirt remembers it fondly, because nothing tasted quite like ketchup that looked like slime. Kid cuisine dinners were the definition of microwave-era magic. Packaged in bright blue trays, they offered a full meal, mini corn dogs, mac and cheese, and a brownie, all ready in minutes. For latchkey kids, it was independence in a box. You peeled back the plastic, listened to the hum of the microwave, and felt like a chef. The sections of the tray kept everything separate because heaven forbid the peas touched the brownie. The packaging was loud, the food was lukewarm, and somehow it was perfect. Cartoon mascots promised fun, and those neon colors practically glowed under the kitchen light. Every dinner was an event, a celebration of convenience and kid power. Looking back, it was terrible and wonderful at the same time, a childhood snapshot of freedom and processed flavor. Nothing today tastes quite like those microwaved brownies, and maybe that's for the best, but we'll never stop remembering them. Sanka coffee was the quiet companion of early mornings and late-night talks, a small orange can that promised the pleasure of coffee without the jitters. Before the 1950s, decaf was a curiosity. After Sanka, it became a movement. For health-conscious adults, it offered a way to keep the ritual while easing the nerves. The name itself, short for sans caffeine, felt sophisticated, like a European secret that had finally arrived in American kitchens. It gave people permission to drink coffee anytime, day or night, and still sleep soundly. Its mild, smooth flavor was comforting, especially for the older generation who still wanted to sip alongside younger caffeine drinkers. Advertisements called it the coffee that lets you rest, and that sentiment fit perfectly into an era that valued calm and composure. Sanka represented refinement, restraint, and balance at a time when indulgence was often followed by guilt. It was coffee made civilized, offering a sense of self-care long before that phrase existed. For millions of Americans, one orange cup at a time, Sanka was proof that moderation could still taste wonderful. Jell-O savory flavors were the culinary equivalent of a dare. Celery, tomato, and mixed vegetable, words that should never be followed by gelatin dessert. In the 1970s, homemakers were told to mold everything, so Jell-O thought, why not salad? The result was wobbly towers of confusion served proudly at luncheons. Each bite felt like betrayal. Cold, rubbery vegetables suspended in sweet goo. The tomato flavor tasted like spaghetti sauce that lost its will to live, while the celery one just crunched wrong. People tried to convince themselves it was classy, cutting into it with forced smiles as children watched in horror. Even the family cat refused samples. The flavor was as bad as it sounds. Imagine slurping a cold tomato soup that fights back. Even worse, these mixes were often paired with tuna, olives, or boiled eggs suspended like fossils in lime slime. Magazine ads called them innovative. Dinner guests called them a cry for help. Every bite was a journey through texture and poor judgment. Jell-O proved that not all foods should jiggle, and certainly not ones that tasted like vegetables and regret. Canned tripe was another 1940s grocery item that feels unusual today. Tripe, the stomach lining of cows, was inexpensive and high in protein, making it a wartime staple. Canned versions appeared on shelves, marketed as ready-to-cook or pre-cooked convenience meals. Some recipes suggested frying it with onions or stewing it with tomatoes, trying to make the chewy texture more appealing. Immigrant families who were already familiar with tripe often embraced it, but for others, it was a jarring new addition to the dinner table. Advertisers tried to market it as hearty and wholesome, but no slogan could make it popular with kids. Ads promoted it as traditional, nutritious, and thrifty, even though many Americans had never eaten it before. Recipes for tripe stew or fried tripe appeared in community cookbooks, showing how homemakers adapted to make it palatable. The texture was chewy and the flavor polarizing, but families learned to live with it. Some immigrant communities already enjoyed tripe, but for many others, it became a strange necessity of the times. Once the war ended, canned tripe quickly disappeared, leaving behind memories of one of the most unusual proteins of the decade. Powdered drink mixes in recycled jars were another staple of poor kitchens. Kool-Aid, Tang, and the cheaper off-brand packets were mixed into old pickle jars or mayonnaise jars, usually with a handwritten label taped to the side. Mothers would dump in the powder, stir it with sugar, and store it in the fridge to save time later. The faint smell of vinegar often lingered in those jars, so your fruit punch sometimes carried a tang that did not belong. Kids gulped it down anyway, because sweet drinks were a treat no matter what. When guests came over, pitchers on the table were rarely new. They were jars that once held pickles, pasta sauce, or peanut butter. Nothing was wasted, and every container found a second life. The bright red or orange liquid inside was enough to make a poor kid feel like royalty, even if it was little more than sugar water. In the 1970s, recycled jars filled with cheap drink mix were the closest most families got to luxury beverages, and everyone remembered them with a mix of fondness and a laugh. For most of the 70s and 80s, coffee was treated like a vice. Medical journals linked it to pancreatic cancer, heart arrhythmias, and elevated cholesterol, and grocery stores stocked decaffeinated brands as the responsible alternative. Doctors told pregnant women and heart patients to quit entirely. The studies that condemned coffee were flawed, failing to account for the fact that heavy coffee drinkers in those decades also smoked, drank alcohol, and skipped exercise. When researchers controlled for those habits, the danger evaporated. In 2016, the World Health Organization formally removed coffee from its list of possible carcinogens, and a 2017 study in the Annals of Internal Medicine found that 3 to 4 cups per day was associated with lower risk of death from all causes. Coffee contains polyphenols, antioxidants, and compounds tied to reduced risk of type 2 diabetes, Parkinson's disease, and liver cancer. Your parents were guilt-tripped into giving up one of the healthiest items in the kitchen. Sending kids alone to the store with a handwritten list was one of those ordinary acts of trust that defined childhood in the 1970s. Parents scribbled a few items on a scrap of paper, handed over a folded bill or a handful of coins, and sent children out the door with nothing but directions and confidence. Kids as young as 7 walked or biked to the nearest grocery store, clutching the list like a mission briefing, scanning aisles with serious faces as they matched handwriting to items on the shelf. Clerks recognized them, helped them find what they needed, and sometimes carried the bag to the door. There was no fear of strangers, no concern about traffic, and no worry about a child being gone for 30 minutes. It was a rite of passage, a small step toward independence every child was expected to take. Parents believed errands built responsibility, and the neighborhood acted as a safety net that made the whole thing feel natural. Today, sending a young child to a store alone would raise immediate concerns about supervision and liability. But back then, a kid with a grocery list and a few dollars was part of the landscape, trusted and unquestioned. Red dye. Number 3 candies glowed with that unmistakable cherry brightness throughout the 1980s, coloring everything from maraschino cherries to fruit snacks to holiday candies children devoured by the handful. The dye made foods look more appealing and festive, which meant manufacturers added it to anything they wanted to sell to kids. Parents bought these treats without concern because artificial colors seemed harmless compared to the sugars everyone worried about instead. Halloween bags, Easter baskets, and birthday favors overflowed with red-dyed candies that stained tongues and fingers bright crimson. But studies eventually linked red dye number 3 to thyroid tumors in laboratory animals, and the findings triggered regulatory action. The dye was banned from cosmetics and drugs, though it remained technically legal in some foods under complicated rules that confused consumers. The restrictions created a strange situation where the same dye could color candy, but not lipstick, raising questions about consistency and safety. Those bright red treats became symbols of an era when appearance mattered more than ingredients, and children consumed the consequences. Brominated vegetable oil, or BVO, was the secret ingredient that made 1950s fruit sodas look and taste so good. It kept the citrus flavor evenly mixed, preventing that oily layer from rising to the top. The chemistry was clever, the flavor refreshing, and the bright bottles flew off the shelves. For decades, no one questioned what brominated meant. It just sounded scientific, and science meant progress. But studies later revealed the truth. Bromine compounds did not just disappear. They built up in human tissue, especially fat, leading to headaches, memory loss, and nerve issues. It was found in everything from orange soda to sports drinks, hiding behind harmless-sounding labels. Teenagers drank it daily without a clue that it shared a chemical base with flame retardants. When that fact hit the headlines, even the most loyal soda drinkers turned queasy. The same chemical family used in flame retardants was floating in your orange soda. When the public finally learned, it was too late for many. BVO had been in use for over 30 years. The Food and Drug Administration eventually banned it, leaving soda makers scrambling for safer replacements. Still, those who grew up in that era can probably remember the taste: sweet, fizzy, and unknowingly toxic. Dieter's Shimmer gelatin drink was a miracle of marketing and a nightmare of taste. It promised to replace entire meals with a sparkling, jiggling liquid delight, words that should never describe food. The bottle shimmered like glitter in suspension, as if you were about to drink a lava lamp. It was made from sweetened gelatin water, blended with artificial fruit flavors so intense they made your tongue tingle. When you shook the bottle, it sparkled under the light, mesmerizing, until you remembered you had to drink it. The consistency clung to your throat like slime, sliding down slowly as if reconsidering the journey. Early testers described it as sparkly regret in a bottle. Yet somehow it was marketed as glamorous, the disco drink for dieters. The texture was somewhere between cough syrup and melted jello, and the aftertaste stayed for hours. Dieters hoped it would help them feel glamorous while losing weight, but it mostly made them question their life choices. The company boasted that it was the future of nutrition, which might have been true in a dystopian sense. Even the label couldn't decide whether to promise health or fashion, as if a disco ball and a diet book had a baby. Shimmer proved that the 1970s could sell anything, as long as it sparkled. No holiday table was safe from spam in the 1970s. In its most notorious ad, the brand proudly displayed a canned meatloaf baked with pineapple slices and glazed cherries, proclaiming it looks as good as it tastes. Depending on who you ask, that might not be saying much. The picture was pure Technicolor chaos: pink meat, golden fruit, and a glossy coating that glimmered like plastic. This wasn't just dinner. It was an edible sculpture from a fever dream. The campaign leaned hard into optimism, framing Spam as a modern miracle of convenience. Housewives could feed their families a holiday feast in minutes, even if it meant serving a fruit-topped mystery loaf that jiggled slightly when touched. What makes the ad unforgettable isn't the Spam, it's the sincerity. They truly believed this was beauty on a plate. Watching it today, you can't help but admire the confidence. It's kitsch, it's culinary chaos, and it's proof that the 1970s could make even canned meat look festive. The early 2000s gave us something truly wild, original Four Loko. It was the drink that seemed like it broke every rule in the book. Half energy drink, half malt liquor, it was nicknamed Blackout in a Can for a reason. College parties, music festivals, and weekend get-togethers suddenly had a new mascot. Bright colors, loud designs, and an even louder buzz. People loved it because it made them feel invincible, awake enough to party all night, and numb enough to forget how much they drank. There was danger in every sip, but that danger was the appeal. The spark that turned an ordinary night into a story you could barely remember. The caffeine kept you awake while the alcohol made sure you forgot what happened next. Hospitals started seeing spikes in alcohol poisoning, and lawmakers took notice. By the end of 2010, the government banned its original formula nationwide. The drink was reformulated without caffeine, but the legend of Four Loko was already sealed in pop culture. For many, it represented a time when excess was celebrated, when danger itself was part of the thrill. Today, people look back on it with a mix of disbelief and nostalgia, because nothing says youth like drinking something that probably should have been illegal from the start. 3D Doritos were like snack technology from the future. The concept was simple. Take the classic Dorito, puff it up with air, and turn it into a crunchy, hollow triangle of flavor. But the experience? That was something else. Opening a bag felt like unsealing a futuristic invention, chips that looked too perfect to be real. They were light yet loud, the kind of crunch that echoed through a cafeteria. Kids treated them like collectibles, saving the rare unbroken ones like trophies. They crackled differently, louder, crispier, more dramatic. The flavors like nacho cheese and Cool Ranch were the same, but the shape made them feel elevated, like eating chips from another dimension. The commercials played into that sci-fi vibe, complete with futuristic fonts and slow-motion crunches. For a brief, shining moment, 3D Doritos felt like the next big thing. Kids smuggled them into classrooms and sleepovers like prized possessions. They became the snack of the future that arrived too soon, vanishing before the world was ready to appreciate them. Decades later, their return sparked that same curiosity, the question of whether snacks could ever feel that cool again. And then, just as suddenly, they were gone, leaving behind the memory of that satisfying crunch that no flat chip could replicate. When they returned decades later, it wasn't just a comeback, it was a resurrection. Green Giant canned peas made vegetables exciting, or at least as exciting as canned peas could get. With the booming grocery industry of the 1950s, canned goods were the heart of every pantry, and Green Giant led the pack. The jolly Green Giant himself, towering and cheerful, became one of the most recognizable mascots in America. His booming "ho, ho, ho" turned something as humble as peas into a promise of health and happiness. Canned peas were soft, mild, and a little salty, but they represented something much bigger, the belief that science and packaging could make nature last forever. Housewives felt proud serving them, confident they were feeding their families well, even in the middle of winter. Kids might have pushed them around their plates, but for parents, they were modern miracles in tin form. Vegetables were no longer something that spoiled. They were always available, fresh in theory if not in texture. Green Giant made it easy to feel good about dinner, to believe that the future of food was safe, simple, and smiling from a label. Tuna Noodle Loaf Mix was the Frankenstein's monster of mid-century meal kits. Inside the box was powdered sauce, dried noodles, and a mysterious gelatin binder that turned dinner into a wiggling block of horror. Add canned tuna and water, and voila, a loaf that looked alive and smelled dead. It wobbled on the plate like it was trying to escape, oozing grayish liquid from its sides. Kids stared at it in fear. Parents pretended it was innovative, and even cats circled it suspiciously. Some households gave up halfway and called it soup instead. It still wasn't edible. The gelatin made it both dry and wet at the same time, a texture only nightmares could describe. It jiggled when it shouldn't have, squeaked when sliced, and somehow managed to taste both fishy and flavorless. Families across America tried to eat it politely, but even the dog walked away. The company behind it called it a wholesome family dinner. History called it culinary trauma. The 1970s produced many bad ideas, but this one defied physics, taste, and mercy. Tuna noodle loaf mix was proof that some foods should remain mysteries. Powdered eggs were one of the most common and strange staples of the 1940s, sold in tins or cardboard boxes as a substitute for fresh eggs. With real eggs sent overseas to soldiers or rationed down to almost nothing, families had to find a way to keep breakfast on the table. Enter powdered eggs, which looked like pale yellow dust and were meant to be whisked with water until they resembled the texture of a cracked egg. They did not taste the same, of course, and many people remembered the chalky flavor with a wince. Still, the government promoted them heavily, assuring homemakers that they could scramble, bake, and cook with them, almost as if nothing had changed. Families learned to make do, folding them into cakes, stirring them into batters, or bulking them up with milk and herbs to hide the flavor. Kids knew the difference, but hunger made them eat anyway. These tins became as common in pantries as flour and sugar, proving how much rationing shaped daily life. Today, it is nearly impossible to find powdered eggs on grocery shelves, but in the 1940s, they were a lifeline. Carnation. Instant breakfast was marketed as nutrition in a glass, but poor kids knew it mostly as a sugar rush before school. The powder was mixed into milk, promising vitamins, minerals, and energy, but mostly tasting like chocolate milk with extra grit. Parents loved it because it was fast and cheap, filling kids up in minutes. The powder never fully dissolved, leaving clumps at the bottom of the glass that kids stirred endlessly with spoons. Strawberry, vanilla, or chocolate, all of them packed with sweetness that got you out the door buzzing. Mothers bought it in bulk, convinced it was a healthy shortcut, even if it was closer to dessert than breakfast. For kids, it was better than cereal some mornings, and for parents, it was one less thing to worry about. Today, people laugh at the idea of calling it instant nutrition. But in the 1970s, Carnation Instant Breakfast was a grocery item every poor kid remembered with a mix of nostalgia and sugar-coated energy. In the early 1960s, the American Heart Association released its first dietary guidelines, telling the country that butter caused heart disease, and within a decade, the butter dish had vanished from most American dinner tables. What replaced it was margarine, a factory-made spread loaded with partially hydrogenated oils that delivered trans fat directly into the arteries of every family that followed the advice. Margarine was not a health food. It was an industrial product that Procter & Gamble had originally developed for candle wax before pivoting to food when electricity made candles less profitable. By 1977, Americans were consuming an average of 7.3 pounds of margarine per person per year, each bite supposedly protecting their hearts. The FDA did not ban artificial trans fats until 2018, more than 4 decades after butter was declared the enemy. Butter had one ingredient, margarine had a chemistry set. The wrong one won. Paper bags only and no plastic in sight was the simple reality of grocery shopping in the 1970s, and nobody thought of it as a choice because there was nothing else to choose. Every checkout ended with the bagger pulling open a brown paper sack, snapping it into shape, and loading items with a rhythm that made the whole process look effortless. Heavy cans went to the bottom, bread and eggs sat on top, and if the load was too much, the bagger doubled the bag without being asked. Families carried groceries to the car in arms full of rustling brown paper, sometimes gripping the bottom with one hand when the weight threatened to break through. Kids loved the bags almost as much as the food inside, folding them into hats, masks, or book covers the moment groceries were unpacked. These bags were reused for everything from trash liners to school book protection. Nobody talked about being eco-friendly because the concept barely existed yet. It was simply how things worked. Today, the paper versus plastic debate has become an environmental conversation that would have baffled shoppers who never imagined a world where the bag itself became the problem. Unregulated sodium nitrate bacon sizzled on breakfast plates throughout the 1980s, cured with preservative levels that manufacturers determined for themselves without strict federal oversight. The nitrates kept bacon pink, prevented bacterial growth, and created that distinctive cured flavor families associated with weekend mornings and holiday brunches. People fried strips by the pound, crumbled bacon into salads, and wrapped it around everything from chicken to dates without questioning what made the meat stay so preserved. Grocery stores stocked endless varieties, and families consumed bacon at rates that seem staggering by modern standards. But sodium nitrate converts into nitrosamines during high-heat cooking, compounds linked to increased cancer risks that accumulate with repeated exposure. Children who grew up eating bacon daily absorbed far more than researchers considered safe once they studied the effects. Regulators eventually imposed strict limits on nitrate levels, forcing the entire industry to reformulate recipes. The bacon of today contains carefully measured amounts, but the memory of those unregulated strips lingers as a reminder of how long it took science to catch up with breakfast. Mercury-tipped thermometers for cooking were once the gold standard of precision. Every 1950s kitchen had one. The sleek silver line inside was mesmerizing. It measured everything from candy to roast temperatures, ensuring no recipe failed. Parents marveled at the metallic shine, and kids watched the silver bead race up the tube as if it were alive. No one realized that inside that innocent glimmer was one of the most poisonous substances known to man. In homes across America, small spills turned into invisible clouds of vapor that lingered for hours, even days. But few knew that inside that little glass tube was one of the most toxic substances on Earth. Mercury, if released, could evaporate and poison the air, damaging nerves and organs. Accidents happened more often than you might think. One slip, one crack, and the shiny silver would roll across the counter like liquid metal, fascinating but deadly. Children played with it, adults brushed it off, and homes unknowingly filled with toxic vapor. Eventually, scientists proved what had long been suspected. Even tiny amounts could cause serious harm. The thermometer was replaced by safer tools, but its legacy lingered in the memories of those who grew up watching that silver line dance up and down with the heat. It was not just dessert, it was dinner backup. The chocolate chip snackin' cake was a box mix from Betty Crocker that promised an all-in-one solution. Just add water, stir, and bake. What came out was a rich, moist cake dotted with chocolate chips, perfectly sized for kids coming home hungry. It was a staple of after-school snacking. You did not need frosting. You did not need effort. Just a pan and an oven and 30 minutes. Moms loved it. Kids devoured it. And for a time in the 1980s, it felt like this little secret weapon in the pantry. But times changed. Cake mixes lost their allure. Pre-packaged snacks took over. Microwavable treats and pre-sliced desserts made the humble snackin' cake look old-fashioned. It quietly disappeared from shelves. People did not even notice at first, but when they did, it hurt. It felt like losing a family tradition you never meant to abandon. The kind of snack that was made, not bought. A little slice of normal that told you everything was okay. Chocolate chip snackin' cake is gone. But the memory of warm kitchens and crumbs on napkins, that still lingers. The back O's salad revolution ads of the 1970s turned something as simple as soy flakes into a symbol of liberation. Men in polyester suits and women in glittery jumpsuits stood over bowls of lettuce, tossing fake bacon bits into the air with joy that bordered on hysteria. The copy declared it a new way to love your salad, as if crunchy red crumbles could save dinner and maybe the decade. The campaign promised flavor without fat, sizzle without guilt, and glamour without effort. But beneath the glitter and jazz hands was something unmistakably awkward: The idea that throwing fake bacon on a salad could be a lifestyle. The smiles looked a little too wide, the lettuce too limp, the joy too staged. Bacos weren't just a topping, they were a statement of artificial excess dressed as progress. Watching the ad now feels like watching a fever dream where everyone is dancing to the sound of a salad spinner. Surge soda was more than a drink. It was a cultural explosion. Released in the 1990s as a direct rival to Mountain Dew, it promised high energy, loud flavor, and total chaos in a can. Teenagers swore by it. Advertisements showed skateboarders, gamers, and thrill-seekers cracking open cans of electric green liquid and living like every day was the X Games. Kids chugged it before school, hoping to stay awake through class, while parents called it liquid lightning. Surge wasn't just a soda, it was an attitude, a lifestyle captured in caffeine and sugar. For some, it was the first taste of rebellion in a can. The sugar and caffeine content was off the charts, and schools quickly started banning it from vending machines after reports of hyperactivity and caffeine crashes. Parents complained, health experts warned, and by the early 2000s, Surge had fizzled out. Years later, fans campaigned to bring it back, and Coca-Cola gave them a short revival. But it was never quite the same. The original Surge felt like freedom, a little reckless, a little dangerous, and a lot of fun. It was the taste of youth with no limits, bottled in neon green and sealed with a rush of pure nostalgia. Oreo O's cereal was breakfast gone deliciously wrong, and that's exactly why everyone loved it. Imagine waking up and pouring a bowl of mini chocolate Oreo rings swimming in milk that instantly turned to dessert. It was sugary, crunchy, and pure 1990s excess. Parents rolled their eyes, but kids thought it was genius. You weren't just eating cereal. You were eating cookies and somehow calling it breakfast. Every spoonful was a rebellion disguised as a balanced meal. The commercials leaned hard into the fun, featuring kids breakdancing through clouds of cookie crumbs. It became an icon of cartoon mornings and sleep-deprived Saturday marathons. When Oreo O's disappeared from shelves, it took a piece of childhood with it. The cereal aisle hasn't been the same since, no matter how many limited editions they release. Oreo O's didn't just feed kids, it fueled memories of the sweetest kind. Cracker Jack was more than a snack. It was a little piece of American magic tucked inside every box. Sweet caramel-coated popcorn and peanuts tumbled together in that familiar red and white striped package, and at the bottom waited a prize that made every handful an adventure. Kids tore into the bags, not just for the taste, but for the tiny surprise buried within, a sticker, a ring, a trinket worth its weight in excitement. In a world without digital screens or fast distractions, that little prize felt like treasure. The sound of the box shaking was the sound of pure anticipation, a simple thrill that never grew old. Even adults could not resist the nostalgia of it, remembering afternoons at ball games or movie matinees where Cracker Jack was the treat of choice. The caramel stuck to your fingers and the sweetness lingered long after the last peanut was gone. Its sailor mascot smiled from every box, a symbol of simpler times and innocent pleasures. It was not fancy, but it was full of heart, a snack that reminded everyone that joy could come from the smallest things. In the 1950s grocery aisle, Cracker Jack stood proudly as a reminder that life's sweetest moments often came wrapped in something humble, crunchy, and just a little sticky. Aspen Soda was Pepsi's short-lived attempt to make apple-flavored cola a thing. It wasn't. Launched with sleek ads about crisp refreshment and alpine freshness, Aspen tasted more like melted Jolly Ranchers mixed with cough syrup. It hit your nose first, a chemical apple aroma that made your eyes water. Then came the taste, sugary, medicinal, and strangely spicy like someone liquefied a candle. Even the carbonation felt wrong, too sharp, like it was trying to fight its own flavor. Pepsi insisted it was light and refreshing, but every sip burned like mouthwash gone rogue. Fans of apple juice were furious, and cola drinkers felt betrayed. It was a soda with no audience, existing in a flavor purgatory. People wanted the tang of cider or the sweetness of juice, but Aspen gave them regret in a can. It was marketed as the next great American flavor, and instead became the next great clearance item. Pepsi quietly killed it after realizing that no one, not even desperate teenagers, wanted apple soda with a cola afterburn. It remains a fizzy legend, proof that even the biggest companies can take a fall from the mountain. Banana extract was a curious invention that speaks volumes about shortages in the 1940s. With imported bananas cut off during the war, Americans had to say goodbye to their favorite tropical fruit. But clever chemists came up with a substitute, flavoring made from plants like fig or banana squash, bottled and sold as mock banana extract. It was meant for baking, so pies, cakes, and puddings could still carry a hint of banana taste, even if no bananas were in sight. The flavor was strange, sharp, and not quite right, but for families desperate to hold on to familiar recipes, it became a fixture in pantries. Homemakers swapped tips on how to blend it with sugar or vanilla to mask the odd aftertaste. Children who grew up with it often said it tasted fake once they finally had a real banana again. Still, in its moment, it was a small miracle, something to bridge the gap between loss and normalcy. Today, the idea of fake banana made from fig extract sounds odd, but back then, it was a strange solution to a very real problem. The American Soybean Association ran full-page newspaper ads in the late 1970s warning consumers about the saturated fat in tropical oils, and the campaign destroyed coconut oil's place in the American grocery store almost overnight. Coconut oil vanished from shelves, replaced by domestically produced soybean oil in everything from cookies to crackers to movie theater popcorn. The science behind the attack relied on studies that used highly processed, partially hydrogenated coconut oil, a product chemically altered to behave nothing like the virgin coconut oil that Pacific Islanders had been cooking with safely for thousands of years. A 2020 review in the Journal of the American College of Cardiology found that virgin coconut oil does not raise LDL cholesterol compared to habitual diets. One trade group's advertising campaign rewrote the American pantry for 40 years. And those are 60 grocery store staples that kept families going when money was tight. If you grew up grabbing powdered milk off the shelf or stretching a pound of ground beef into 3 meals, you already know every single one of these. Drop a comment and tell us which item brought back the strongest memory. And if you have not subscribed yet, now is the time. Thanks for watching.